Welcome to the Nail Lady Show. I'm Gina. I own a bunch of pretty cool hardware stores, and this is my friend Andrea.
I own a bunch of sort of cool nail salons here in DC called The Nail Saloon.
Yeah, so Andrea and I meet for coffee every once in a while, and we talk about business. We talk about friends. We talk about movies. And one day we realized that we were essentially running the same kind of business. I sell nails. She paints nails, or our team does. And so we wanted to share some of our business knowledge, and I think this is the perfect time for us to talk about culture because both of us have built businesses with a pretty strong culture.
I definitely believe that is the case.
What does that mean to you?
Boy, culture, what does it mean? It's such a loaded word, right? I think culture informs everything that a business does and does well. Culture is the heartbeat of a business and what makes it different than another business. Because I could have a nail salon and you can have a hardware store, and many such establishments exist.
Right.
But I think what differentiates one from the other, is really the culture that you infuse in the company that you build. And I think it's essential. You know, it can become a bit of a throwaway word, company, corporate culture.
Right.
But I actually believe it is the lifeblood of the nail salon for sure. And I'd love to know from you. I mean, you've owned your hardware store for now
22 years.
22 years.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you've created a company culture that you're proud of.
Well, I could take this in a bunch of different directions, but one of my longtime sort of heroes is this guy that started an organization in Los Angeles called Homeboy Industries. Father Gregory Boyle was sent to be a minister in between two housing projects in a really bad part of LA, like 30 years ago. And in those housing projects were representatives of 14 gangs. You know, gangs do terrible things to each other. And Father G wrote several books. His first book, Tattoos on the Heart, is like so dog-eared on my desk. And in his first book, he said, even gangs have a culture. And I remember when I was sort of young and naive as opening my first business thinking, well, duh, of course they do. But what he was trying to say was you can either create a business where it goes awry and nobody wants to stay and people are mean to each other, or you can build something and nurture it and be purposeful, and you're going to create a culture where people do want to stay, where they want to be, where your customers understand and feel that inner, I don't know, deliciousness of when they walk in and they know that your team is happy to be there.
It also, I think, informs to the customer what to expect when they walk into a business that has a strong culture, because I think there's a lot of look, it's not an easy thing to run a shop of any kind out in the world. So hats off to any business owner out there doing it. But when you add an element of culture, you're really informing sort of the intangible, I think, to your customer, because they like going there and they sometimes don't even know why they like going there.
That's when it's working. That's
right?
Yes.
Because it's kind of like a hidden sort of the undertone of everything that you do. I like to say that culture for us is a filter. Culture isn't something that we just put on a poster in the back of our locations, in the back room, in the break room, and we just kind of throw it around casually at corporate events. I think culture is the filter through which we see and address issues, problems, and we apply it to not only our clients, but to ourselves, to each other. When we're in one-on-one meetings with a team member, with a colleague, we try to act in a way that is informed by the values that shape our culture. At the Nail Saloon, funny, our values are excellence, kindness, and generosity. Mm-hmm. And we took a long time to land on what the values of the Nail Saloon would be. I mean, we thought long and hard about it. We had a small group working on it, and we polled our technicians, and we finally landed on those values. And in that order, people would say, oh, generosity and kind. I was like, no, guys, it's excellence first, kindness second, and generosity third. And one day I realized, EKG. It's the heartbeat. It's the heartbeat of the Nail Saloon. And I thought this is meant to be. We try to operate like we're very data driven, but we like a little mysticism at the Nail Saloon. And so for us, EKG became this way to measure everything that we do is through the EKG, which is our heartbeat, right? So if we can do everything with excellence, kindness, and generosity, we will never fail. I always say to the team,
that's so good.
And it was kind of kismet that it happened that way, but I really believe it, that if we act in a way that genuinely tries to use that filter of EKG, there's nothing that you're ever going to do that's going to be a mistake.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What about your company values?
Well, so we started out, we had such a fantastic sort of zeitgeist at the very beginning. My very first teammate had been in prison for 17 years. And my second teammate was recovering from a crystal meth addiction.
I just have to pause here. For people not understanding what that means, Gina has a phenomenal, I think one day one of the episodes should only be on why you believe that hiring a former drug dealer is a good strategy. And I'm not being funny, even though that does sound funny.
Yeah.
She actually has a whole theory on this. We're going to record a podcast that only is like, I am interviewing her about this sort of theory. I would like that because I think people would really be inspired by your story. So keep watching because that's going to be coming down the pike soon.
Thank you.
Okay, so carry on about your...
So those two initial hires, and Tommy, who had been in prison for 17 years, worked with us for 10 years. Mark, who was a crystal meth, who was recovering from a crystal meth addiction, just retired from my company after 21 years. And those two gentlemen taught me how to learn from everybody. I call them my non-traditional teachers, and they helped lay the foundation for a culture that is inclusive, that is representative, that is welcoming. It doesn't matter what your past is. You can come here and be seen and heard and felt like having those experiences was not something shameful, and that is something that happens all across this world. If you have been involved in the legal system in the past, people don't have to hire you. If you have some sort of addiction or you've missed work even for like leaving to raise your children, coming back into the workforce has been a struggle for certain groups of people, and I wanted everyone to feel welcome. And so that really helped start building. And I think particularly for those two guys in the beginning, Mark taught me years ago that connection is the opposite of addiction. And I wanted to build a culture and a place where people felt connected. And so that's exactly what we wanted to do. Now, and I don't want to take up all the airtime. It's very easy to say that, but how do you actually do it?
I was going to ask you because
how do you do it?
A lot of I think culture plays in companies. They feel like platitudes, right? They feel like virtue signaling and saying the thing exactly all the things that we all know that all of us could say about any business. So how do you operationalize culture?
Yeah, so I've mentioned in other episodes that there are times when we wanted an adult to come save us. We hired a business coach who was really well-versed in culture. We took personality tests. We defined what we wanted what we wanted to be when we grew up. Our very first our first core value is be a good neighbor. Well, what is more neighborly than the local hardware store? And so we hired someone to help us define those values, and then we determined where we were going to infuse them in the business. And so we use them in our interviewing questions. If you have to have a counseling session, we use a core value to define and describe what it is you're not doing well and how you can improve. If you have to be terminated, you probably violated a core value. And on and on and on, how we give bonuses, how we give out awards, all of those relate back. So it becomes institutionalized in a way that everybody feels a part of. And then on top of that, we layered the policies and procedures that had to do with hiring, training, and retaining.
Yeah.
So if you are going to hire folks, I don't know what it's like in your industry, but in mine, in retail, turnover is appalling. It is not a profession. It is not a respected profession by bosses anymore. I want people to come to work and feel like they are a professional in a retail job.
Yep.
So what does that mean? I want to have low turnover. How do I have low turnover? I make sure my onboarding process is good for everybody. It's good for the trainers. It's good for the new hires. We're tracking, do you quit within 60 days? Why? Did we hire the wrong person, or does our training stink? So we layered on top how we were going to onboard and then train and then retain. Part of our retaining structure is what I like to call stay interviews.
Yep.
You've probably been in a job.
We do them too.
People leave and they say, "Oh, well, before you're out the door, let's
when
do
it's
an
too
exit
late.
interview."
When it's too late,
yeah,
right?
I'm gone. So we will take every quarter a subsection of our team, and we'll say, "Why are you still here?"
I love it.
It's basically three questions, and it's very telling. And we learn what we're doing right, what we can improve, what we need to do more of, and those are the tangibles that have made it strong.
It's funny because I think at the nail salon, one of the things that we do is we just hammer to use a Gina term, a hammer. We hammer in our values. No, we really talk about them all the time.
Yeah.
We talk about them all the time. We try to use them in our language. We try to call out and give positive feedback when we see it. That was excellence. That was kindness. That was generosity. And thank you for responding to the client with that in mind, or thank you for treating your colleague with that in mind. And I'm looking for that in this task that we're asking you to do. I think a lot of times people write these things down, put it on a wall, forget about it, and they think that people are just going to naturally absorb them. And I think operationalize it means using them. And also lead by example, right? So you have your managers, your leadership, use those. You can't just expect sort of the middle of your organization to use the values and push them out. You have to have everybody at every level of your company, I think, really trying to understand what they are and working in a way that speaks to clients, that speaks to vendors. I mean, we joke at the nail salon that anybody that comes through our UPS drivers, we ask them their names because we want to greet them by name when they come in, and we offer them a beverage because it's cold outside and people want to be seen. And we say, do you need to use the restroom? How's it going, John? How was your route today? Because we really are trying to operate in a way that speaks to our values, irrespective of people who come to the nail salon to get a service. If you just walk in thinking you're going to the yoga studio that's above us, we still want to treat you with our values.
Yeah, because they'll come back. They'll come back. We, what you said is so important. We have one of our core values is communicate respectfully. And oftentimes we will, as business owners, and everybody listening will probably experience this at some point, overlook something because something else is going right. And here's an example. My busiest location, it's now our second busiest location, had a manager years ago who communicated very disrespectfully to his team. And one of our core values is communicate respectfully. And I terminated that manager. We have terminated so few managers over the years because we have just, of our training, and we just have a great culture. But he was violating that core value in a way that was not respectful for his team, that violated everything that I personally felt like we were trying to build. But that store, by all metrics, great sales. Customers were happy. Costs were low. If I had only looked at those things, I would have let him continue to curse at his team.
And what you're doing is, I think you're setting up sort of something cancerous down the line, right? That you might not see it today.
Correct.
But then suddenly you find out that you have 80% of that team unhappy and ready to jump and they'll leave. And so that's why I think it's so important to really build culture from the inside out and from the ground up and from the top down and every which way, because I do think that it helps people understand that they're not just a part. This isn't just work. This is almost like a movement. And without trying to sound Pollyanna about it, we try to keep our values very simple so that we can always say, did you act in this way? And if you did, there's no getting in trouble at the nail salon. A lot of times our clients will give us feedback about something and we'll say, we're going to loop back with that technician or with that hospitality team member at the front desk to see what happened. And they're like, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. And I'm like, we don't do that at the nail salon. No. Nobody gets in trouble at the nail salon. Right. We talk like adults, like professionals. We're also trying to professionalize this industry in a way that makes people feel like they have an important job and they're trained and they're given tools and they're also given a voice, right? So our values aren't just for the way that we treat our customers or people walking in the door. Our values are how we treat one another. Just the other day, one of our COO was talking about how instead of saying, you're welcome, that we should infuse my pleasure. And we've started to use it. And it was something that feels a little bit forced in the beginning to say my pleasure. At first we were like, my pleasure, wink, wink, ha, ha, ha. But now we're actually saying it because we feel that, words are words, yes, but there's a feeling behind the way that we communicate that instead of just saying, you're welcome or no problem, we say, my pleasure. I love doing that for you. Yeah. So it's the little things that become the big things that really inform sort of the foundation of what the business that you're trying to create that I think ultimately is good for business. And that's my next question to you. Why do you think having such a strong corporate culture is good for the bottom line?
Well, I mean, there's a million reasons, but one of them in particular is it costs a lot of money to keep hiring people. If you're churning teammates because you are a lousy place to work, it's expensive.
It is.
And big, really wealthy companies can handle that. We can't absorb that at our size. I mean, it saves us a lot of money if someone is good and they stay.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, to me, that's one of the most important reasons to build. I mean, one, I want it to be a good, healthy place for people to stay, but I also, from a bottom line, don't want to have to spend all the money to keep finding new bodies,
and it also creates effectiveness, because then you have culture champions that are just they know what the culture is, and so anybody who's new is coming into a place where 90% of the workforce is already practicing that culture actively and practicing those company values actively, and so for them it's a lot easier to learn. So even your training, the curve of the ramp up time of getting somebody up to speed becomes shorter as a result of it.
Here's a little known secret, and you might have something like this at the nail salon too. 90% of our customers ask the same 10 or 12 questions. And as soon as our team understands the answers to those 10 or 12 questions, they can sell the whole store.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
And so you might think, oh my gosh, you have all these people on your team with all this expertise. Well, they know how to answer the 10 or 12 questions that 90% of our customers ask.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And so that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. It also makes
operate.
It makes their jobs easier,
so much
ultimately,
easier.
Right? If you're giving, I think also part of what company culture is really training people properly. Yes. And I do think that people sometimes, managers have the expectation that people are just going to get it. Well, people aren't going to get it unless you tell it to them. And I always say, when somebody has a behavior that isn't ideal, I think the fault lies with the person who is meant to instruct them.
Yes.
I always say the buck stops with the person who was supposed to teach them.
Yes.
And now if you teach somebody something and you check in with them and they say that they've learned it and then they don't do it, then that's on them.
And it's fair. Yep.
Right? But I think until somebody is really clear on the expectation, and I think that's part of culture too. You train people to behave and to respond and to answer those 10 or 12 questions in a way that matches what you would like, and then they're free. They're free to go.
Yeah.
And to also express themselves, right? In how they are truly, because I think one of the things that we've been really hammering with our team, hammering again,
it keeps coming up. Yeah, I love it.
I feel
do
like
you sell hardware?
No, but I know a great place to send you to.
Thank you.
But we always say, I don't want anybody to work at the nail salon to be more talkative, less talkative, more smiley, less smiley, more funny, less funny. I want them to be who they are.
Yeah.
But in that, there's a baseline that we all agree to sort of commit to in our values. Now, what does it look like for somebody to be generous when they're kind of loud like me? It sounds like one way, but we have a lot of shy, more timid colleagues who their way of practicing generosity isn't like mine. So I think that's why I like to say it's a filter, because we want people to show up as they are, the way they are, but the best version of that, with this framework of our values, which is really, I think we've been able to create it. And it's also why we have teammates that have been with us since really day one. And it's a huge treat. I mean, 11 years almost.
That's fantastic.
Which is ridiculous if you think about it. I mean, we have team members who have been with us since before the nail salon build out was completed.
Wow.
So that's really special.
There's a high turnover in your industry?
In the nail industry, it's also, because it's not very professionalized.
It's not healthy either in a lot of places, right? I mean, you have created an atmosphere that the air is clean. And the polish is clean.
We aim for that, right? We want people, if you're going to spend 8 hours there working, we don't want you breathing any weird fumes.
Yeah.
So we have the source ventilation and good cleaning practices, and we make sure that our clients wash their hands before our technicians have to touch them, because that prevents disease from spreading beyond COVID, right? So, but we try to like live our values genuinely every day, and I think the team as a result feels held. I think ultimately that's kind of the big takeaway for me, is that culture is a daily play. We emphasize it. We call it out when we see it. We call it out when we don't see it. And we're constant. I always say to Amanda, our COO, I say, that's the job. That's the job.
Yep.
Is to keep calling it out when, for good or for bad. Okay, so Tommy and Mark, they've obviously helped you create the culture that you've built. How do you infuse that down to a team, and why is it important for your team to really feel like they are part of something bigger than just having a job?
Well, I think everybody who feels fulfilled when they go to work does a better job, period. I mean, that's the business case for it, right? You want a stronger bottom line. I think what we didn't quite get to is that there are so many things that you can do when you build a business to make your team happy and satisfied that don't always cost a lot of money, or either fall into maybe a compensation bucket and an other. Prior to working at the hardware store, I worked in the technology industry, and at one point I was in charge. I called myself Julie, the cruise director. I was in charge of the trips and the game room and the beer budget and, all of the things that you imagine coming out of a big tech company. And then I opened a retail business and I didn't have any money. So what was I going to do? I was going to be really nice to my team. I was going to have them over for a barbecue. I was going to, as soon as I could afford it, add benefits, add vacation time, add a 401k, meaning all of the things that cost money that are important to people as employees, and then all of the more intangible, touchy-feely, fun things that you can add that might not cost any money, or a little bit. A donut breakfast, for example, once a week. I think it's important when you start a business to think about both what's going to cost you a lot, what isn't going to cost a lot, and how do you layer those things on to help influence the culture that you're building.
I agree. And it's the small things and the big things. I remember when I was in business school, one of the most famous case studies on company culture and customer service is the Four Seasons case study that the Harvard Business Review put out. And it's a really interesting story about how you can infuse culture for all of your employees. And the Four Seasons does this practice that the nail salon now does too, which is to essentially, we give all of our technicians, which is more than 150 of them, a gift certificate every year that they get to come in and use with a friend and have a service on us so that they can experience what it's like to be a client and to know they leave going, wow, this is amazing. And when they come in to use their gift certificate, they're not to be treated at all like staff. Like nobody acts like they know them. They're greeted in the same way.
Oh, I love that.
It's almost a performance, and they love it because they get to see what it's like to be on the other side. But I think part of what we do with our team is to really treat them in the way that we want to be treated. And I frankly treat my team in a way that I expect them to treat me too. And I know that I'm the boss, and that sometimes means that people just inherently
they're nice to you because
they don't love me really. But I treat them well, and I expect them to treat me well, and I expect them to treat themselves well and each other well, because otherwise, what do we do? I mean, we have to be there.
Yep.
We have to spend the time there. If you've chosen to work there and you want to work there, then you're spending 8 hours with us. Then what does that look like? You can enjoy it or not. So for us, it's really important to this whole notion of not getting in trouble, really hearing people's side, working with them to course correct when they make a mistake. I remember one time I walked in and we had a crisis situation with a client, and I was called, and the client was still there, and I walked in, and the technician looked at me from at the very end of the salon, and she was like gray.
Aww.
She just looked at me, and I remember I went like this to her, and I said, "It's gonna be okay."
And that's all she needed.
That's all she needed. I'm like, "You're fine. You're not." I think people immediately like, "Am I gonna get fired?" I'm like, everything's gonna be okay. We're only human, right?
Yeah.
And so as long as we treat each other that way, then I think we're good.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, it's kind of like a bonus program, which is not the topic of this conversation, but it needs to be treated a little like a game, meaning you have to keep not changing the rules when it comes to culture, but infusing new things that keep it fresh and make it exciting. And how are you, for us, it might be a new button that we get, or, a topic for another day will be the fact that we're selling the business to our team. Well, that's a whole other way to infuse every value that we've ever tried to build at the hardware store and take it to the next level. And so how do you keep upping your game? Like, are there tools that you use?
Right now, we are currently this month doing a heartbeat contest. We have all 5 locations competing to see who has the strongest heartbeat with our EKG, and we have a whole report card that everybody's trying to.
I love it.
And every week we say there's 2 stores that we're not telling anybody who's in front, but we're like 2 people are leading, 1 is behind, 2 are in the middle, and we're going to do a big fun team outing for the winning team, and we just want people to be reminded, and it's kind of a way to re-energize them, right? Because we do the training and the posters and the conversations and the one-on-ones, but we try to infuse our values in a way that feels different and fresh. We've done break room Olympics where we give every location a budget, and they could go and redo their break rooms and add, and we rated them on how they incorporated the values into the break room and use of space and making it special and making it warm and friendly and accessible. So we try to do things that kind of generate the buzz, because it still works.
It still works.
And people, let's be honest, I don't think people would come to just volunteer at the nail salon. They go there because It's a job.
It's a job. It's a good job.
I don't think I'd be there if I were just volunteering either. But, it's part of how you kind of create, you kind of gamify it a little bit to remind people of what it is and give it a fresh look and just to keep beating the drum. You can't just, like I said, you can't just put it on a wall and expect people to like absorb that and infuse that and live that out unless you really just, you operationalize it. One of the things that I love the most is that all of our hospitality team members, which is everybody that greets you when you walk into the nail salon at the front desk, they have every month the opportunity to send me, for a bonus, a self-reported act of excellence, kindness, or generosity. I don't follow up. I don't check. It's an honor system, and they get a little bonus for it.
I love
for doing
that.
An exceptional act of generosity, kindness, or excellence. And it's my favorite thing to read at the end of the month because I literally read things like, the other day, one of our general managers left her team, left somebody else in charge of the front desk, and went to help a woman who was not even at the nail salon go find her car.
Aww.
And walked the parking lot with her for like 15 minutes. And the woman said, "Thank you so much for helping me do this. I was completely stressed out."
Aww.
And so it has nothing to do with the nail salon.
You know that you're doing something
but
right.
it has
Your
everything.
team is doing something
It
right.
has everything.
Yeah.
So it's
we're going to run out of time, but I do have one more question, which I think is really valuable for both of us because we both scaled our businesses. We've both gone from one to many. And maintaining that culture when you grow is tough. I mean, I have always said that some of the big box retailers, when they had 1, 2, or 5, were wonderful. And then you can see the farther away you get from the core, the harder it gets to maintain that culture. What do you think the key to that is?
Training. 100%. Training, and have everything be a process. I know that sounds very unromantic and boring. And I always joke that I left corporate America. Now I'm creating
now you're corporate.
Now I'm creating corporate America. So the joke's on me. But really, train, have a manual, have a process, have an SOP. Our manual is called a WOA manual.
Oh, for God's sake.
Because most of us are women. We have some guys too, but our WOA manual, we put everything in our manual. We have scripts for things. We have, the scripts are just suggestions, right? We don't want robots working with us, but we give you scripts so that you can apply that to your voice. But it's training and giving people the answer. It's kind of like your 10 to 12 questions. I love that. And that is definitely my biggest takeaway from this conversation, which is if you train people and you help them understand what your vision is and really give them the tools, I think they can sort of replicate that. How about you?
Well, you just nailed the close. I mean, I don't know how I could follow up with that.
Nail the close. Who's the nail lady today?
If you have any questions or comments for us, suggestions, things that you would love for us to address on a future episode, please put them in the comments. Find us on all the social medias. We would love to hear from you. And this is the end of this episode of The Nail Lady Show.
Thanks for watching.